Hello, wine lovers! I am Yaroslava, sommelier and wine educator, your guide on this journey through the world of wines, spirits and cocktails. Today we will uncork the fourth bottle of champagne knowledge. The first was full of champagne history, while the second and the third explored the technology behind its production. You can find links to previous episodes in the first comment. We have covered grape varieties allowed for champagne production, created the base wine, blended the cuvee, transformed wine into sparkling by secondary fermentation, discovered the significance of maturation on lea, explored the various levels of champagne sweetness, delved into the process of achieving crystal clarity, and explored many other intriguing aspects. Now I will dive into champagne producers, the great champagne houses, and the people who tend the wines. I will discuss the expansion of champagne houses, provide useful information on champagne labels, explain the significance of size, and offer tips on serving champagne. Let's start with champagne producers. Champagne is produced by vineyard owners, 92% of all producers, cooperatives, 1%, and champagne houses, 7%. However, the vineyards in Champagne are small, while houses are large. Consequently, 70% of all champagne are produced by houses, which own only 10% of the vineyards. They purchase grapes and or base wine from the producers and complete the production process. Their champagne is branded with the house's name. Among 90,000 vineyard owners, only 2,000 produce wine under their own name. Outside of Europe, 97% of all champagne production comes from houses. There are currently 265 champagne houses, but 60% of all champagne business belongs to 25 great houses. The cuvee of great houses is characterized by a very stable taste. When you purchase a yellow label, you know exactly what will be in your glass. While stability is nice, sometimes we create diversity. Additionally, the prices of great houses are not always favorable. Fortunately, every year more and more producers are starting to make their own champagne, and it's becoming increasingly available outside of Europe. How to understand who produced the champagne in your hands? Look at the bottom part of the label. I have underlined it with red. NM, Negociant Manipulant. This indicates a champagne house. They buy grapes from growers, blend based wine, and produce large quantity of champagne. Example, Krug, huge champagne house. RM, Récoltant Manipulant. They are growers who make and sell their own champagne. This category includes many artisan champagne producers. Example, Yerman Cri. CM, Cooperative Manipulant. Enter C, Récoltant Cooperative. This indicates the producers who grow grapes and make their own champagne as a part of cooperative. MA, Marque de Chateur, buyer brand. In this case, we cannot find any information about the producers. So, for us as a consumer, this is meaningless. Let's take a closer look at champagne vineyards and their classification. Champagne was one of the first French regions to receive Appellation Origine Contrôlée status. This was not surprising, considering that at the beginning of the 20th century, the level of adulteration of champagne wine has reached unbelievable numbers. To address this issue, all vineyards were rated. Given that champagne is primarily produced by houses rather than vineyards, the rating of grape quality was conducted in an unusual manner. In the early 20th century, grape prices were regulated by the government. Using the Échelle de Cru system, all 317 champagne villages were divided into 3 groups based on the grape quality. Échelle means stairs in French, and the position on the stairs indicates how much of the maximum price determined by the government each year each village could receive. The 17 best vineyards, known as Grand Cru, received 100%. 43 Premier Cru vineyards received 90 to 99%, depending on their position on the stairs. The remaining vineyards, 75% of all, received 80 to 89%. While price is now regulated by the market, maintaining and improving the classification remains crucial for every vineyard. Typically, non-vintage champagne is made from grapes from 80 to 90% ADC vineyards, while the vintage wine utilizes grapes from 90 to 100% ADC vineyards. For Tete de Cuvée, only grapes from Grand Cru vineyards are used. If champagne comes from a Grand Cru vineyard, it will be mentioned on the label. However, champagne houses don't always specify this for their Tete de Cuvée as it implied. The current ADC system assigns the same rating for entire village, but a village may have several vineyards of varying qualities, so a new, more detailed system is currently in development. Here is the list of some big and famous champagne houses along with their Tete de Cuvée. Boulanger. Founded in 1829, prefers Pinot. Tete de Cuvée, vintage Grand Année. Moet Chandon. Established in 1743. Tete de Cuvée, Dom Pérignon. Krug. Established in 1843. This is very traditional house that used barrels for the first fermentation. Tete de Cuvée, Clos de Mensil, a very rare wine made from 100% Chardonnay. Paul Roger, founded in 1849. Tete de Cuvée, Sir Winston Churchill. Pommery, established in 1856. Tete de Cuvée, Cuvée Louise. Louis Roederer, established in 1760. Tete de Cuvée, Cristal. One of the top not vintage wine, Brut Premier. Vauclicot, founded in 1772. This house also prefers Pinot. Tete de Cuvée, Le Grand Dame. One of the top not vintage wine is the yellow label Brut. Huge champagne houses have a tendency to expand globally. As a result, many of them have established branches in various regions around the world. For example, Moet Chandon has branches not only in well-known wine regions of the New World such as Australia, New Zealand, Argentina and the US, but also in emerging markets like China and India. If you come across a familiar champagne house name in an American store, it does not necessarily mean that the bottle is from Champagne, France. Of course, the word champagne would be present on the label, and the place of production will be evidently mentioned. These wines are not formally considered champagnes, but they are made according to the rules and standards of a respective champagne house, resulting in a decent taste. However, their prices are often lower than their French counterparts. This is partly due to the brand recognition and reputation associated with the name, as well as the fact that they don't undergo the same extended maturation process as champagne, but only required by production rules. For example, some US domain of huge champagne houses: Mumm, Napa Mumm, Moet Chandon, Domaine Chandon, Taittinger, Domaine Carignan. Two labels, for example, Australian Chandon and California Mumm. Let's explore the information typically found on a champagne label using Pierre Manquis and Moet Chandon as examples. Appellation. Champagne Appellation Control indicates that the wine is champagne made in the Champagne region using the traditional method and approved grapes. Interestingly, Champagne is the only region in France where the words Appellation Control are not required on the label. Simply Champagne is sufficient. Place of production. Champagne can only be made in France. It is important to check the country of origin to avoid confusion with wines labeled as champagne, but produced elsewhere, such as American or Russian champagne. Producer. In our case, Pierre Manquis and Moet Chandon. Type of producer. Pierre Manquis, RM, Récoltant Manipulant, indicating a producer who grows grapes and makes champagne. Moet Chandon, NM, Négociant Manipulant, one of the major champagne houses. Level of sweetness. Both are bruts, which is common for most champagne. I discussed champagne sweetness level in previous episode. vintage if applicable. Our Pierre Manqui is 2006 vintage. Not vintage champagne may be marketed as NV or have no indication at all. Our Moet Chandon is non-vintage and has no marks. Wine style: Blanc de Blanc, wine made exclusively from Chardonnay. Blanc de Noir, made from Pinot only. Rosé or blend. Pierre Manqui: Blanc de Blanc, Moet Chandon, Rosé. So now, if you have a bottle of champagne which is unknown to you, you can take a closer look to the label to get an idea what to expect from the wine. Now about the size that matters. About the size of champagne bottles. Champagne and other sparkling wines are produced in bottles of different size. Some variants are shown in the picture. Most popular, standard, 0.75 liter. Magnum, double standard, 1.5 liter, also quite popular. Small bottles. Demi, half of standard, 375 milliliters. Piccolo, quarter of standard, 187.5 milliliter. Big rare bottles, named after biblical kings and historical persons. Jeroboam, 4 standards, 3 liters. Matusalah, 8 standards, 6 liters. Salmanazar, 12 standards, 9 liters. Balthazar, 16 standards, 12 liters. Melchizedek, 40 standards, 30 liters. Does the size of a bottle influence the taste of a wine? At first glance, wine is wine, and it should not matter which size bottles sealed in. But it's not that simple. Only standard and magnum bottles are always made completely by the traditional method, with the wine staying in the same bottle where secondary fermentation took place. For smaller and larger sized bottles, it's difficult to remove sediment by the traditional method. As a result, the transfer method is usually used for them. This is a simplified variant of the traditional method, eliminating the complete process of removing sediment from the bottle. Second fermentation takes place in the bottles, standard or magnum, but after it's complete, the wine is quickly cooled down to increase CO2 solubility, then transferred to a tank, filtered to remove sediment, and bottled. However, despite all attempts to make this process as quick as possible, the wine oxidizes more than in the bottle and loses some CO2, altering the taste. Of course, there are some exceptions. For example, oldest champagne house, Gasset, makes its Grand Reserve only in 3-liter Jeroboams using the standard traditional method. On the other hand, how often do you drink champagne from a bottle bigger than Magnum? Small bottles, especially piccolos, are mainly used by airlines, so we can consider them as a minor inconvenience for travel. And finally, about practical stuff. When it comes to serving sparkling wines, it's best to use flute glasses to maintain the bubbles for longer, as discussed in previous episode about the role of bubbles in wine taste. The stem of the glass should ideally be long to prevent wine from warming up too quickly from the head contact. For young wines, they should be cooled to around 6 to 7 degrees centigrade, 43 to 45 Fahrenheit, while older ones can be served slightly warmer, around 9 to 10 degrees centigrade, 48 to 50 Fahrenheit. However, if you are only tasting champagne and taking just a couple sips, it's better to use a white wine glass. This allows the taste to open up more quickly. Sparkling wines can be enjoyed on their own, but they also well pair with food. Dry varieties complement dishes like omelets, smoked salmon, chicken and cream sauce, seafood or sushi. Rosé, on the other hand, is going nicely with red meat, such as grilled steak. They're also very good with grilled shrimps. Sweet sparkling wines are especially delightful when paired with fruit desserts. Now we are familiar with champagne producers, the great champagne houses and grape growers, expansion strategy of champagne houses, useful insights on champagne labels, the significance of bottle size, and tips for champagne serving. In the upcoming episode, I will demonstrate how to quietly open a champagne bottle like a waiter in a restaurant, how to pop cork with satisfying effect and without causing any damage, and how to perform some brush like a hussar. So, stay tuned for more, subscribe on my channel. And now, let's raise a glass to champagne. Santé!